and the Mandrell Sisters show first aired on November 18th, 1980. It was a variety show that aired on NBC and was hosted by Barbara and her two sisters, Louise and Irlene, who had been performing with Barbara since they were kids. Now, in 1980, Barbara, who was 31 years old, was one of the most popular entertainers in all of country music. Barbara had been performing since she was 11 years old and had even toured with Johnny Cash, Patsy Cline, and George Jones as a teenager. She was a natural on several instruments, including the accordion and saxophone, but she made her name as the Sweetheart of Steel on the steel guitar. She had released her first music in 1969, and by 1980, she had 14 top 10 hits and 3 number 1 hits, including Sleeping Single in a Double Bed. She had already won the CMA Female Vocalist of the Year and Entertainer of the Year awards, and she would win them both again in 1981, becoming the first artist ever to win the Entertainer of the Year award 2 times. In other words, Barbara Mandrell was the perfect choice to host a nationally televised show. Now, when first approached, Barbara didn't really want to do the show. She wanted to continue to focus on her music. But her sisters, Irlene and Louise, who were both also entertainers, wanted the chance to do something on the national stage. So Barbara decided to go forward with the show as a way of saying thanks to her sisters for following her around and supporting her during Barbara's career as a teenager and young adult. Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters show got underway in November of 1980, and it aired on Saturday nights. Barbara did the show the way she did everything else, wide open, with a healthy dose of optimism and a touch of childlike playfulness, just to keep things fun. Now, just coming off the biggest annual award in country music, the CMA Entertainer of the Year, Barbara was ready to show the world what she and her sisters could do. She didn't go into Hollywood with a meek and quiet attitude, letting people tell her how the show would work. Instead, she went in with a confident boldness, taking the lessons she had learned in country music and applying them to her weekly variety show. Barbara had a say in everything, from the acts, to the guests, to the costumes, to the dance routines. If it was happening on the show, Barbara knew about it. At first, pure adrenaline and the newness of the show kept the sisters going. On the first 3 shows, they had people like Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers, and Bob Hope. Through the shows, they continued to have big stars like the Statler Brothers, Tennessee Ernie Ford, Roy Rogers, and Gladys Knight and the Pips. Of course, the sisters were the stars of the show, and they included comedy routines and music into every single show. The Barbara Mandrell show made something very clear. Barbara was much more than just a singer. She was a comedian, a dancer, an actress, a writer, and a producer. Barbara Mandrell was truly an all-around entertainer, and Barbara and her sisters' talents were put on full display in front of the entire nation on Saturday nights. But the schedule for the show was brutal. Absolutely brutal. It went something like this. Mondays were for the dance routines and stage design. Tuesdays would focus on more planning and costumes. Wednesdays, they would work on music. Thursday would be costumes, skits, and rehearsals. And then Friday, they would record in front of a live audience. It soon became apparent that the physical and mental toll of a weekly variety show was even more intense than the constant touring of a country entertainer. Learning the dance routines was painful. Everyone would have bruises for days after. One time, Barbara decided to count her bruises from a rehearsal, but stopped at 20. Mentally, the sisters were always on the go. Even after going home late at night, their mind was on the show, the next thing to do, wondering about what they missed, perfecting this routine or that song in their mind. It was non-stop. And the constant need for new material was insatiable. Once the show was done on Friday night, there was no time for a break. Literally all day Saturday and Sunday was trying to come up with a new routine, a new idea, a new edge, something different. If you put the same thing out on a variety show 2 weeks in a row, you lose viewers. It's just that simple. And that just couldn't happen. Now, one thing Barbara really liked about the show was the massive reach it had. Even as popular as Barbara was in the country music world, there were a lot of people that would never listen to country music. Barbara loved bringing her passion for country and gospel music to a wider national audience. Now, sure, on tour, she might sing in front of thousands every night, but the viewership for Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell sisters could be up to 40 million people on a Saturday night. Now, the first season of the show was a huge success. Americans loved Barbara and her sisters, and the proof was in the ratings. NBC was all too happy to renew the show for a second season. Now, the second season started out even bigger than the first. Just days before the second season started, Barbara Mandrell won the CMA Entertainer of the Year award for the second time in a row. No one had ever won the Entertainer of the Year twice. No one. Not Dolly, not Willie, not Loretta, not Merle, and not Johnny. Barbara Mandrell was the first to ever do it. Now, Barbara was literally everywhere. She was on television, on tour, and at the top of the country music charts. Barbara Mandrell was a national star. In 1981, she released I Was Country When Country Wasn't Cool, and it went straight to number 1. Now, I Was Country When Country Wasn't Cool was a true story for Barbara. She had come a long way since being called hillbilly back in her high school in Oceanside, California. Barbara had literally been country when country music was still a hillbilly music form, limited to pockets of rural America. And now Barbara Mandrell is literally at the forefront of putting country music into the national spotlight with her weekly variety show. But whatever Barbara did, she did with every ounce of energy, passion, and charisma she could muster. She was pushing herself harder than ever, but the physical, mental, and emotional strain was starting to show. Besides losing a ton of sleep, Barbara was starting to lose something else: her voice. Barbara did her best to protect her voice under all the strain she put it under day after day, year after year. Well, she did almost everything. She was still smoking cigarettes. Now, she had smoked since she was a teenager. She stopped one time for 9 months, but eventually picked the habit back up. She had always managed before, but she had never been under this much continuous physical and mental strain. Barbara did other things she could to protect her voice, even writing notes to the staff of the show so she didn't have to talk so much. But things just kept getting worse. Her voice eventually got so bad that Barbara had to take cortisone shots each Thursday and Friday to be ready for the upcoming rehearsal and taping. Then she'd have to take pills the rest of the week to counteract the side effects of the cortisone. Now, as a singer and host of a national variety show, losing your voice was about the worst thing that could happen, and it was happening to Barbara. Now, Barbara continued to see the doctors, but things weren't getting any better. Eventually, after a few more visits to the doctor shared some solemn news to her. Barbara, either you quit the show or you will lose your voice. Now, Barbara was stunned. This was life-altering news. She faced what she called a hard choice, but a rather simple one for her. In fact, she didn't have to think twice about it. The show was nothing compared to her voice. Her voice was her livelihood, her career, her identity. Her voice was her life. Barbara says it wasn't difficult to give up the show at all. It's just something she did. There was really no thought or sadness about it because she knew what she needed to do. The NBC thought she was holding out for more money and came back several times to see what could be done to keep the show going. Eventually, Barbara had her doctor write a note to NBC that said, if Barbara continues the show, she will be committing vocal suicide. So the show ended. Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell sisters' last episode was on February 27, 1982. But Barbara Mandrell was anything but finished. She would continue to make music, she would continue to have #1 hits, and then almost ended up being killed at the age of 36. But that's a story for another day.